Willow, Season 9, Chapter 13, The Curse of Wrath.
You're late.
No greetings, no welcome. Philomène Dufour is straight to the point. On any other given day, with any other random teacher, I would be irritated by the attitude. I've been at this long enough to recognize when someone is trying to establish dominance. It's what someone who reads the wrong kinds of self-improvement books calls a power move. You usually find the explanation in a chapter right before the one extolling the virtues of a raw meat diet or whatever. It has been my habit to call this sort of thing out, as much for virtuous reasons as to set myself up as equally dominant. After all, if you're going to call me out, and I clap back without hesitation, then who's really in charge? For a long time, I told myself it was me. The real answer is no one, and everyone's a fool. I'm aware of this pattern of behavior and the consequences because I've had plenty of time to ruminate over them after being kicked out of cooking school. On our first day, Chef Frederic Gagnon did that thing where he asked us to look at the person to our right, then to our left. He then told us that by the end of the program, one of the two would be gone, or something equally ridiculous. I don't recall the Institute having that high a failure rate, I remember saying. In fact, doesn't the website brag about the post-graduation placement being nearly 100%? It probably didn't sound as cool and defiant as I'm making it seem, but that's how my relationship with the most important teacher in the program began. I know better now. It's one thing to think myself clever for seeing the posturing for what it is, but another to act on that knowledge in a self-destructive way. There's more than a diploma on the line when dealing with this new mentor, more than pride or even a career. There's Gulliver. There's Nisha. Sorry, I say, eyes wandering around the makeshift outdoor kitchen. Won't happen again. She's done little to change her cooking situation since yesterday. The old witch is also wearing roughly the same thing, though she's added a scarf to her attire, something thin that's unlikely to keep her warm. I notice she avoids knitted apparel, staying clear of wool and yarn. Unlike yesterday, though, there's something simmering, and the aroma fills the clearing. A small pot hanging over an open campfire bubbles noisily, like a cage with a restless bird. It swings and jumps with the movement of its contents. I detect the smell of lamb, along with apples and thyme. There's also a richness to the scent that makes me think she might have potatoes or carrots in there, too.
The pickings are slim,
Philomène says, acknowledging my focus.
No animal that I've raised and named to butcher and cook. Herbs I had to forage or procure at the market. At least I can do my work in the open air, feet digging into the soil, the stars hidden by daylight, but no less above my head.
For the first time, I notice Gulliver. He's sitting on a tree stump, like a child waiting for the doctor to check his heartbeat and reflexes. He's wearing sweatpants, presumably to make it easier to access his wound. We offer each other a timid wave, but remain quiet otherwise, silenced by Philomène's presence. Things do feel like they have come full circle. I watch the old witch walk around her kitchen, and I see the shadow of Chef Gagnon as he presided over his. Both give off the same aura of dominance, of ownership. This is their territory, and we should be glad to be allowed within. What we bring is reverence and respect. What we take away is knowledge and wisdom, but only at their pleasure. Is this for him? I ask, pointing at the simmering pot while lowering my bag to the ground. Philomène gives a brief glance at her handiwork as if she had completely forgotten its existence, then strides over to take a closer look at what I bring to her domain.
No, this is something else. The roof to my house, or the walls to my home. It keeps me safe from predators and isolated from the elements. Maybe I'll teach you what that means someday. For now, let's have a look at what you've brought.
I snap open the clips to my bag and pull the flap open to reveal the contents. It's not that big a bag, so I couldn't take everything I wanted, but there is enough in there to feel comfortable. Unlike the Institute, where I was given a thorough list of required tools and equipment to purchase, along with which retailers had to deal with the school, what I brought today was left to my own judgment. Like a child asked to pack for a long drive, I stuffed as much as I could in my bag, prioritizing emotional support over practicality, which means I carried with me a lot of useless items, like a small skillet and 2 plastic spatulas. One is my favorite for picking cookies off a cookie sheet, the other I like for making omelets because the eggs don't stick to the end. I did, however, manage to pack one thing that got Philomen's attention.
Ah,
She says, picking out my wooden spoon from the gathered utensils.
there it is.
She holds the common item as one might a fragile bone or a delicate crystal, pinching the handle while cradling the head. There's no reason for her to take special notice of the spoon. It's a store-bought wooden thing of no particular value. Stained and aged, it's only valuable to me because it was a gift of contrition. Philomen recognizes it as more than that.
Precious,
She explains, examining the boring grain of the factory-hued wood.
demon-gifted and imbued with years of passionate works, both mundane and magical.
Her fist closes on the handle, and she pulls her own spoon from a pocket in her skirts. Philomen's spoon is roughly sculpted, carved without refinement and little care. What it lacks in elegance, however, it more than makes up for in mystery.
Do you know what makes both of these so special?
She asks, brandishing the spoons like weapons. I glance towards Gulliver, still sitting on his log. He watches the discussion with rapt interest. He reminds me of a patient at a hospital, eavesdropping on a doctor-patient conversation as they wait their turn to be diagnosed. Intent, I answer, with more confidence than I have. History. The old witch smiles a vulture's smile, devoid of pride or joy, but she nods and hands me my spoon back.
Correct on both counts. Will channeled into the instrument over the years and in the making of hundreds, if not thousands, of recipes. A good witch's spoon isn't bought, nor is it made. There are no spells that will cut corners, no magical components that will hasten the seasoning. Only time and force of will. Take my spoon.
Not only is she offering the utensil as an example, but handing it for me to grab, handle first. It's heavy for a kitchen spoon. Using it to stir for a while must be wearing on the arm, especially for someone with such thin limbs as Philomen. There is an intensity to the weight, however, as if the power of the old witch gave the spoon mass.
Look at it. Smell it. Feel it in your grasp. What do you think this spoon was made of?
Aquilo, I answer, without a moment's hesitation. For a second, I worry that my reply was too hasty. I'm taken back to the previous night when I was in the presence of the majestic tree. Its mournful attraction echoes through Philomen's spoon, and I wonder, what power would she have if given access to the fruits of the Aquilo tree? It's nonsense to worry that she might guess at the existence of Olivia's secret simply by looking at me, yet I can't help averting my eyes. There's no such thing as an Aquilo tree, Gulliver cuts in, repeating the refrain like a trained seal. I worry that Philomen will not take kindly to the interruption. She already has Gulliver cowed and sitting politely on a log. It's hard enough to see my friend drained of his habitual enthusiasm, reminding me of the darkest moments in our friendship. I hate to imagine Philomen snapping at him for speaking up.
You know the town slogan,
she says, a sly smile on her lips.
Good. But it wasn't always that way. You don't get to do the things I've done without powers otherworldly. That kind of power isn't easy to tame, however. Doris tried and failed at great cost. The Fig Girl has dabbled, I've noticed, but also to little avail. Even I could pull on the branches of the Aguilo, but never bend them to my will. This spoon.
She grabs the utensil back from me, brandishing it dramatically in Gulliver's direction. Poor guy recoils, uncertain what to expect from the gesture. No fireball erupts, nor is he turned into a newt, but Philemon is amused nonetheless.
This spoon is the closest I've come to harnessing the power of the Aquilo tree. It holds power, of that there is no doubt, but it's like powdered chicken stock. Similar, yet a pale imitation of the real thing in the end.
She looks at her instrument for a lingering moment, twisting the spoon between her fingers. The mischief has melted from her features, and even the malicious twist of her brow has softened. Instead, she's left with an awkward expression that I can't quite place. Something I've never seen on my own face. If I had to define it, the closest approximation would be a mix between melancholy and fear.
Together, though,
she whispers, speaking as much to me as she is to the utensil.
Together, we can wield whatever power is left in this chunk of wood. Oh yes, daughter. With your will and mine, we can accomplish miracles.
There's a sudden tremor to her lower lip, and her pale eyes grow wide as her pupils dilate. Now there's an expression I can identify, one that is etched in the minds of every human being since we first knew that night was dangerous and fire burned.
Together, we can stand up to death itself.
She means to offer me what I want, to help me save Nisha, but she's peeling back the skin on her true motives. Where I should see ambition in her eyes, instead, I see something else. Terror. The forest grows quiet, responding in kind to Philemon's sudden introspection. The only sound to break through the stillness is that of the simmering pot and the cracking of wood as it burns. Her thumb traces the length of her spoon, nail digging into the tight grain in the process. It takes a moment, but eventually Philemon shakes her head as if it were covered in sand or cobwebs. Her hair, wild and gray, is like a thunderstorm. It swirls around her skull in chaotic abandon, and when it settles, it's to a Philemon with renewed vigor and determination. I regret to notice that the malice is also back in her eyes, along with that wicked smile of hers. I think I prefer my old crazy witches terrified.
All right, young man,
she says, pulling herself up to her full height and turning towards Gulliver.
Now that Miriam is here, let us have a look at you, shall we?
Gulliver looks stunned for a second, not sure what to do next. Meanwhile, Philemon towers over him, thick wooden spoon held tight in one hand like she's about to beat him over the head with it. I think he sees the same portrait as I do because the mighty Eddie G can't peel his eyes from the utensil.
What are you waiting for?
Philemon demands.
Off with them.
Off with what?
The pants. Unless you'd rather I cut these open, too.
Philemon takes a few steps toward her makeshift counter, walking in a straight line in the direction of her chef's knife. But in any other situation, it would be amusing to see Gulliver flustered like this. Right now, his naked anxiety makes me want to send him away from this place, from this woman.
Please,
Philemon mocks.
Do you have any idea the things I've done? The things I've seen? I've bound a nature goddess and stepped into the inferno.
She pinches the skin of her left arm, pulling at it enough that it looks like it might tear, yet she shakes and wiggles the tightening flesh.
This body, she continues, I've reknit it from almost nothing, literally turning myself into ingredients. I think I can handle a pair of underwear. Now, Off with them."
Hesitant at first, Gulliver obeys, and Philemon abandons her plan to cut up another pair of his pants. Again, the cursed wound is exposed to the light, and again, I am both revolted and fascinated. Every time he twitches, I can see Gulliver's muscles move and his tendons flex over the exposed bone. There, in the middle of that impossible anatomy lesson, there's a fang. Philemon touches it with the tip of her gnarled finger, applying more care than I ever thought her capable. Gulliver's breathing becomes shallower the more she pokes and prods, mild panic crawling over his features despite her impeccable bedside manners. A sudden smell of charred flesh and heat fills the clearing.
"I suppose it's too much to ask if the creature who did this to you still lives?"
Philemon's question sounds academic, like she knows the answer already but is looking to make sure there isn't an exception she's overlooking. Like a doctor diagnosing a common cold, she's eliminating less obvious options. "It's dead," Gulliver answers, struggling to get the words out between two breaths. "Very dead. We killed it." At long last, Philemon pulls her finger back, allowing my friend to gasp for air and relax a little. The heat and smell remain, but start to dissipate, blown away in bits by the wind's breath.
"Poor job of it, I'd say."
The old witch crosses her arms, looking down on the wound with no small amount of contempt. I wonder what she's thinking. Clearly, this tooth is the cause of Gulliver's distress. A cursed fang embedded in his limb, both keeping it functional but infecting him with impossible rage. Rage I've only seen hinted at on rare occasions. "What happened?" I ask, finally letting curiosity get the better of me. The way he looks up at me, I'm reminded why I hadn't pried yet. This mix of shame and fear in those big brown eyes of his make it hard to insist. He looks back and forth between me and my ancestor, and I hate to notice that he seems to see us both as equal threats. Not to him, of course, but to his secret.
"Go on, son."
Philemon crouches down to sit on her heels.
"I can't help you if you don't talk."
There's little kindness in her approach. She isn't coddling him or teasing the story out of him. "About 4 years ago," he says, more a long sigh than a sentence, "Mayor Byrne came to Doris for help. It was just before fall. Day after the equinox, I think. I was there that evening, chatting, eating too many pastries. I didn't know anything about all this magic and miracles." He waves his hand around, sweeping it over the entire panorama of cobbled-together witchcraft of Philemon's outdoor kitchen. There's awe in his description of magic and miracles, but also a dash of disdain. It's a strange spice to find in Gulliver's appreciation for the weird and wonderful. He's so far ever been amazed by the things supernatural. To taste that little pinch of resentment feels unnatural. "Marie Belle was freaking out," he pushes on. "She was so panicked explaining what happened to Doris that she didn't even notice me. Can you imagine that? I was taking up half the counter, and she didn't even realize I was there until Doris pointed me out. She was frantic, demanding Doris go help. We're talking about a lady that's 98 already. While she was still in pretty good shape for that age, there's only so much you can ask an old woman. No offense."
"None taken, son,"
Philemon answers, the mischief in her eyes sparking anew at the apology. "At first," Gulliver continues, "I didn't even think of tagging along. These weren't my monkeys, it wasn't my circus. But then they started talking about hunting down some dog in the forest, and I thought, nah, I can't let Doris and the freaking mayor do that alone, at night, so I volunteered to help. I assumed it was just some poor rabid mutt, and kept thinking that there must be better people to handle that sort of thing. Doris prepared something, I can't remember what, a mint chocolate tart. She looked like she was about to go to war, so I didn't disturb her with questions. It was all very peculiar, though." Philomene takes a moment to go stir the simmering pot over the campfire. The way she pulls herself to her feet illustrates what Gulliver meant about someone near a century old perhaps not being suited to wander the forest. I swear I can hear every single joint in that woman's body pop as she straightens up, and her spine makes the sound of a handful of dried spaghetti being broken as she stretches. "Going to war with a chocolate mint tart?" I ask, taking advantage of the short pause. Gulliver smiles and shrugs. What do you want me to say? I'd been doing deliveries to Aquilo for 4 or 5 years by then. I'd seen how weird the people can be. That's why I kept sticking around for hours after doing my deliveries. That and the brownies. He stretches his cursed leg, twisting it so the open flesh is exposed to the sky and as easy to inspect as possible. The embarrassment of sitting in his underwear has worn off, replaced instead by goose flesh and a slight shiver. Whatever Philomene has in mind, I hope she gets it over with before my friend gets hypothermia. "The rest of the night is a bit of a blur," he says, focused on his own exposed bone. "It wasn't a dog, obviously. It was one of those hellhounds from the forest. Doris tried to appease it with her tart, and maybe it would have worked. The smell alone was soothing enough to dull all our senses. But no one told me the plan. No one explained what was going on. When that thing got close to Doris, I panicked." The image pops into my brain with crystal clarity. It's too easy to imagine what happened next, especially knowing Gulliver as I've grown to know him over the years. "You got between the hellhound and Doris," I guess out loud. "Didn't you?" He smiles and shakes his head, looking like a child about to confess to something absurdly stupid. "Worse," he corrects. "I tackled it. It was like wrestling with a tractor. That thing was massive, compact, and vicious. I'm not a fighter. I'm just big and I lift a lot of heavy things. But I thought I could take an ugly dog in a fight. Before I knew it, that thing had ripped out a chunk of my thigh and was ready to take my head off in a single bite." His mood darkens and my stomach turns as he reaches down to poke at his own femur. He does it with such nonchalance and familiarity, I can only imagine he's prodded at the unnatural gash plenty in the past. "I assume I'd be dead if not for Mayor Byrne and Doris. Marie Belle killed the dog, or so she thought. Stabbed it with that sword from City Hall. Turned the thing to ashes. Except..." Gulliver hesitates to finish, putting his thumb on the tooth lodged inside his leg.
"Except for one fang,"
Philomene finishes. She stands over Gulliver, his pants neatly folded over her arm. He doesn't look up, satisfied with a slow nod. "It took a while for the curse to kick in," Gulliver says, averting his eyes from me, looking instead deep into the woods that surrounds us. When it did, though, when it started, Doris was the one who kept it under control." "With pastries?" I ask, hoping to inject some levity. "And brownies," Gulliver continues, attempting a smile. Edmund Gulliver Kemper doesn't look any different to me now that I know his story. It does cast a strange light over our previous interactions, especially those first few days after we met. How much of a gamble was he taking, giving me a ride to Aquilo? Was I ever in any real danger in his presence? And how did he find out about the curse?
"Foolhardy boy."
Philomene drops Gulliver's pants on his lap.
"By all rights, you should be dead. I can't help you, not this moment."
"But you said..." Gulliver stands to his full height, his sweatpants falling to the dirt. His fists clenched, he looks ready for a fight. I can't blame him. He's been promised salvation and suddenly had it refused. But I can't allow him to hurt Philomene, for Nisha's sake.
"Oh, calm down, child,"
she says, weaving her fingers together in front of her chest.
"It will be done, but I'm going to need Miriam's help to perform such a feat. Now go. I'll summon you once I have the cure you seek, or if I have need of your services."
Classes, if that's what you can call these sessions of mentorship, are a trial. We spend the afternoon not cooking, but going over and revisiting all my past efforts, only so Philemon can pick at my mistakes, pulling at threads until it feels like the last 3 years are falling apart. None of her comments are about the food either. While I go into details about my choice of ingredients and dissect all of my techniques, she dismisses all of it to instead target on what I'm doing wrong. I don't focus on the glyphs enough. My pantry is filled with food that's been overprocessed or hasn't been grown by my own hand. By the time we're done, most, if not all, of the majesty and mysticism of what do 4 women do has been whittled away. It's not that I don't understand the importance of natural ingredients. I know and I appreciate the ritual of having a hand in raising and killing the animals we eat. But how limiting is that? How am I supposed to make a sumptuous meal if most of my time is spent tending a garden and raising my own chicken and gutting my own fish? There is no room in Philemon's philosophy for compromise in the name of flavor. The only thing that matters is how much power a witch can leverage out of her work. In the end, however, she's right. I've stared into the eyes of the pale man. I felt his touch on my skin, and I know it'll take more than something delicious to stay his hand. If I'm going to start saving lives, I'm going to need to learn to wield real power, no matter the cost. With a heavy heart, I make it back to my cafe only an hour after sundown. Leaving Philemon in the darkness of her forest hideout seems so wrong at first taste. This is an old lady with little to defend herself against the wilderness. I could easily bring her home and give her a warm place to stay while she mentors me. Only last spring, Farmer Pickering had to chase a bear off his front lawn before his dogs got involved. The woods of Aquillow aren't just birds and chipmunks. She did not seem worried herself. Instead, she damn near kicked me out when our lesson was over. Skin cold, ego flattened, exhausted, and hungry, I look forward to the warmth of the cafe. There's food there. Some butter rolls and a nice minestrone, assuming Stefan hasn't sold out of either. If so, I'm sure I can whip up something just as tasty. Oh, what fresh hell, I mumble as I'm about to reach the front door. I see them through the window, over a dozen of them clad in robes so white they become blinding under the light of my dining room. And for each robe, there's at least 2 more villagers enduring the presence of the Pilvists. Can they still call themselves Pilvists if they don't have a cloud to worship? The stray question doesn't have time to linger long as I pull the door handle and walk into my cafe. The chimes do not interrupt the procedure unfolding within. There's little they can do to compete with the noise of the assembled crowd, or Ian's incensed speech. So long as we embrace what makes Aquillow unique, Ian speaks, his voice calm and soothing, yet loud and dominant. He's like a cool seaside breeze, refreshing and brisk, but impossible to ignore. Nothing in the world compares to our little village, and we should celebrate that, not hide from it. I scan the faces assembled, spotting regulars here and occasional customers there. I catalog who's wearing a white robe and who's here as a civilian. My wall will need updating, but every spoonful of clarity is important if we're going to cook this dish. He says you gave him permission, Stefan says when I'm close enough he can be heard.
He says you're endorsing him,
Annabelle cuts in. There's no mistaking the accusation behind her words. How dare I support Ian Greenwich instead of our beloved Helen Edna notary public? It's complicated, I offer as justification to Annabelle and myself. Stefan is quick to shrug and go back to bussing tables. Meanwhile, Annabelle is staring me down as if she could unravel my reasoning with enough intent of her own. I can't go around the counter without walking in front of Ian. While he might be deep in his rambling, almost drunk on his own words and promises, I'd rather he not notice my presence quite yet. The last thing I need is for him to call on me to say a few words. He demanded my endorsement as part of our deal, but that doesn't mean I'm interested in giving a public address. It even crosses my mind that now that I know where to find Philomen, I could easily put an end to this arrangement. To avoid conflict, I could allow him to finish talking, then gently usher everyone out, maybe close early. It's a brief fantasy. I wouldn't want to get on Ian's bad side, not for any tangible fear, but rather because I've grown fond of him over the years, despite the eccentricities. Also, he's still a damn good customer. Speaking of customers, it looks like there's a bright side to sacrificing my integrity on the altar of local politics. I don't remember when the Aquilo had such a big crowd of customers crammed into it, on a Thursday night no less. Looking at everyone, mingling and talking, half listening to Ian's platform, I see them drinking coffee and tea, all while indulging in cakes and powdered donuts. Except that's not right. A single column holds up the menu of the Aquilo Cafe. That single structural point supports the writing of said menu and all the cooking that goes behind each item. Once in a blue moon, I'll collaborate with the likes of Olivia, who'll bring in some apple compote for me to use, but otherwise, this is a one-woman show, and I'm that woman.
You see it?
Annabelle asks, barely audible over Ian's fervor. I hadn't when I came in, but I sure do now. And not just see, but smell, too. I know the aroma of my food like a mother knows the eyes of her children, and these are not my donuts, and this is not my cake. For starters, I have neither of these items on the menu. Second, I would have done a better job of both of these things. The donuts look and smell too oily. The cake looks a little undercooked and has too little frosting. Both lack in imagination and flair. I'm almost offended that no one seems to notice that I didn't bake either of them. Mother, stop me, I whisper through gritted teeth. I'm going to murder him.
It's fine,
Annabelle mocks, popping a not Aquilo certified donut ball into her mouth.
He said you were cool with it.
Soon after, Ian finishes his speech. He thanks me for the opportunity, but doesn't ask anything further. Customers linger, thankfully ordering more coffee, tea, and food. The cake, which looks crudely made, as if by an amateur, and donuts vanish into the kitchen, making room for sugar cookies, brownies, and the other usual treats I keep stocked. Finally, after almost 3 hours of client churn and political talk, I'm left alone in my cafe to start preparing tomorrow's menu. It's tempting to make my own chocolate cake and powdered donuts, if only to remind everyone of the real potential of these delectable delights. I'm putting the key into the lock of the front door, already going over a mental ingredient list to see if I have everything I need, when a face materializes from the night. Stern and almost emotionless, aside from a teaspoon of irritation, it stares back at me through the window. The face's owner pulls off a leather glove, carefully pulling at each finger, only to use the naked hand to knock at the door. Helen Edna, Notary Public. I can't think of anyone I'd rather see less at this moment. A little late for coffee and pie, I say, allowing her in. I am afraid pleasantries and stimulants are not the purpose of my visit. She steps in, but stops at the door. I hear there was quite the gathering here tonight. I've mentioned it before, but I was a pretty good kid. Few were the times that I ever did anything to outright disappoint my parents. I never shoplifted, didn't do illegal drugs, and only started drinking when every other underage kid in Montreal starts drinking. That is to say, I'm not familiar with the feeling of being caught red-handed. I'm sorry, I stutter, looking around the dining room as if one of the chairs or tables would cover for me. I owed Ian a favor, and he wanted a place to hold his thing, and I agreed before I knew what I was doing, and... Helen cuts me off by raising her hand. She stretches her lips into a thin smile, barely visible to the human eye. Not enough to comfort me, but close. It's fine. I'm not the jealous type, but I am curious. I thought we both agreed that Ian being mayor would not turn out well for Aquilo. More than you can imagine, I hear myself think. She believes Ian is just a religious fanatic with wacky ideas and beliefs. If Helen knew of the association with Philemon Dufour and the Pilvist's ambitions for Aquilo, I doubt she'd be so forgiving. I know. If you want, you can have the Aquilo for an event of your own. I'll cater it for free. I can even make the food a little more convincing, if you know what I mean. At that, she frowns, and I know I've made a mistake. I would never want to bribe, manipulate, or otherwise coerce the citizens into giving me their vote, Miriam, she sighs. But I suppose I appreciate the offer. We'll see. A long, quiet, uncomfortable moment passes between us. I knew when I accepted Ian's offer that I would be betraying my friend, but I never imagined it would be such a sour feeling. Well, she says, putting her glove back on. It's getting late, and I'm sure you have much to do preparing for tomorrow. Helen, I grab her forearm, which seems to surprise her. Miriam, I assure you, it's fine. We'll talk tomorrow. I let go, both of her arm and of the hopes that I'll get any resolution tonight. Later, I go out back to toss away the leftover cake and donuts. It's the only food I have left, and I feel terrible for the raccoons that I've got nothing better. Then again, they're raccoons. I've seen them happily feasting on rotting fruit and a rotisserie chicken carcass left in the sun for half a day. These are not gourmet critters, let me assure you. Except, after I lift the cover of the dumpster they call home and drop the contraband food into their midst, it isn't met with the usual excitement. Oh, for a moment they swarm around the bag of scraps, scratching with glee to discover what bounty I've brought this time. Will it be ham sandwiches? Perhaps some smoked salmon? The usual pastries, of course, but which ones? I know what Brioche is hoping to find. The celebration is cut short, killed before it even gets a chance to really start. Instead, they all look up, and in a weird imitation of Helen Edna, give me the most disappointed glare. They, too, feel betrayed. The dawn goes so far as to hiss at me. I haven't heard the dawn hiss since we faced down a demon together. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubeau and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.